Well, welcome back, everyone, and it's just another day in the life as a military wife. I've got little baby snuggled in my lap as I am trying to record this. Hopefully, baby stays asleep and puppy dog decides to stay calm. But we'll see. Today's episode, I really wanted to focus on the situation with the lack of accessibility, or basically the shortage of baby formula in the United States. What led up to it, what's caused it, why it's persisted, and all that. So if you were not aware of that, you're going to be hearing some more about it. And if you were aware, you maybe, hopefully I'll be covering things that you were not aware of. There are some recent developments, but overall, it's kind of interesting to see what happened when and why. So, as always, I am your host, Sam Wolf, and you're listening to Life of a Military Wife. So, I'm going to break down a bit of a timeline for you. Some of this timeline I've pieced together myself, and some of it has come from media sources. I will admit a lot of it comes from Fox Business just because they had the best timeline, but I'm going to be using some sources from New York Times, New York Post, CNN, NBC. So a lot of this, it's been widely reported. So hopefully that's, just so you know, basically that's where my sources are coming from. So what happened was in late 2021, around October 2021, the Food and Drug Administration received a whistleblower complaint from a factory worker who worked for Abbott. Now, Abbott makes Gerber and so Gerber's a separate company. Oh my gosh, sorry. Abbott makes Similac by and large. Anyway, that they were not living up to their safety and cleanliness standards, that there were some violations going on at the Michigan plant. In December, they finally of 2021, so they get the report in October. In December, they decide to follow up and actually do an inspection and interview with the employee to investigate the complaint. Oh, sorry, no, it wasn't until January they sent in inspectors. So they did they started the investigation and did the interview in December. In January 2022, they sent in inspectors. In February, they initiated a recall with some of the formulas. And at this point, no one was talking about shutdowns of factories. None of the competitors who make similar formulas were informed, hey, you might need to ramp up production or anything. Because this isn't like other food stuff. This isn't like when they recalled hot dogs or tomatoes or whatnot, and you could just live without or buy something different or whatever. This is a primary food source, as in 99% of what infants, babies, are able to consume, and they are not largely able to consume other things. Well, I mean, if they can be breastfed, then it can be breastfed, but not everyone has the ability to breastfeed. Not everyone produces sufficient milk. There are issues with that. And then the other thing is, it also takes into consideration the women who decided not to breastfeed because they work or something like that, and would have breastfed if they realized that there was going to be some production issues coming up, that there were some things, and they were given a heads up. Because, and I will get into this sort of stuff later, but there was an instance where a lactation consultant informed me that she had a mom with twins calling and freaking out because she couldn't find formula and she wanted to know if she could get her milk supply back. But it was a little too late for that because you can't always just get it back at the drop of a hat, depending on Anyway, it can be too late for that. So there was this wasn't like it just dropped in their lap and they had to shut everything down. This was a process and there could have been more warning given. There could have been a plan made because again, this started in October. We're still going to February before anything really happens. So first the recall happens and it's because of 4 reported illnesses. Now, at the time, Um, the White House said that the recall and everything was happening because 4 babies had died, which at the time was not true. And Abbott got really upset and put out a press release saying 4 babies got sick, they didn't die, they're fine, blah, 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 blah. However, all 4 cases were hospitalized, and eventually, after Abbott made that press release, 2 of them did die. However, when they went through, and now this is March, plant has been shut down and is still not up for production or anything, which has seriously caused massive shortages all over the United States. Because if you think about it, they produce Similac. Similac is one of the big producers of formula in the United States, one of the biggest producers of formula. Enfamil, Similac are the two big dogs. And Similac in particular and Enfamil have a specialized formula that really is not carried or created by the other ones. Um, it's the really sensitive ones. So the thing is, and not everyone knows this, babies react differently to different formulas. Some babies can have any baby formula. Some babies can only have certain types of formulas. Um, Enfamil and Similac tend to be like the big dogs, like I said. And there are babies who can only take Enfamil and babies who can only take Similac. Our kids have done better with one particular brand than another, like is common. But there is a less common brand that got hit hard because it is very similar to those top 2 brands, sensitive formula. It's one of the only store brands that actually is cleared by the FDA for that kind of a level of quality. It's also less expensive than the big 2, Enfamil and Similac. It's the one we use by and large or have used. Anyway, because that store brand is used as an alternative, it's got the same quality, it's less expensive. It immediately got bought out and supply issues. It just could not keep up with demand because it was filling in the gap. It actually used to be produced by Similac, but that n- the company that um the store anyway, the switched companies on who produces it. But because of what all of that happened, there was basically a run on the market for other brands of formula. And so they ended up shutting down the plant and inspectors found surfaces that were not being maintained properly. And anyway, there was 8 instances between the fall of 2019 and February 2020 of that bacteria contamination going on. So bacterial contaminations. So they shut it down and they said, hey, you cannot reopen it without submitting a plan and without getting our approval, yada, yada, yada. So the issue is there's a run on the market. You have lots of women who are formula feeding because they thought they had the luxury to formula feed and didn't need to nurse, um, that all of a sudden don't have formula. So you have a high demand, and one of the bigger producers of formula is out of the game. And then that means that everything else is in higher demand. And for individuals who had to use Similac because that's what Abbott makes, um, and couldn't use Infamil, they were stuck scrambling to find alternative formulas that were hopefully as good a quality, which is not easy to find, and were really expensive. I don't think people understand how absolutely pricey formula can be, especially these niche alternative like brands that fit specific dietary and digestive concerns, which babies have. Not everyone's digestive system is the same. So it just became a real thing. And that is when the real crisis started. And I remember thinking at the time, oh, thank goodness, I've already had all my kids because I've always needed to supplement. And that is the type of formula we've always used. And it's now massively out of stock and impossible to find. I'm so glad I'm not dealing with this. And I had friends who were about to have kids and stuff like that. I'm like, okay, do you need help finding formula? What do you need? The military community, a lot of the spouses really rallied and are still rallying around each other. If anybody has extra formula, they're like getting on the spouses' pages and saying, hey, I have this. I don't need it. Who needs it? It's free. And then when we found out we were expecting, and I was like, oh, crud. Okay, well, hopefully, it's they've been working on this for a while. Hopefully they'll have it all figured out by the time baby comes. Yeah, that was optimistic because as you'll see, I'm getting back to the timeline. In April 2022, Abbott submitted a corrective action plan to the FDA, and they began working on implementing it and the process of getting the factory back up and running. Um, in May, they were warned it could take at least 2 months to get new product on shelves. And by June of 22, they started producing. Um, yeah, June 4th, they started producing. So in May, they said it's going to take us 2 months. It took them a month to even get to the point where they could start producing it. They started producing in June. They said it'll take 2 months to get stuff on shelves. I don't know if you've been through a formula section lately, but that was overly optimistic. And in another one of the reports I was reading, a third party um, logistics people were saying that no, actually, this could quite easily be a year-long plus problem. And hey, guess what? That was somewhat prophetic because it's been a year and we still have a problem. So in the summer, Congress started putting together packages, different bills to try to address the situation. Some would allow the importing of more formula from other countries that isn't normally cleared to be imported. And so that started, and that I think got extended recently. The other one that they tried to pass was giving the FDA more money. And was sitting there going, I don't understand why they need more money to come up with a better plan. They should have been doing something and had a good plan to begin with. a lot of the issues we're facing is because there was no forethought, there was no warning, there was no explaining, hey, we're looking at doing this, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, shutting down the factory was obviously necessary. I mean, by the stuff I'm looking at, it looks like in the long run it was a good thing, but they could have given a heads up to other formula producers that, hey, you need to ramp up production. Could you produce X amount more by this time? They could have gone to Congress ahead of time and said, hey, we need an emergency um, bill waiver allowing more formula into the country. As it was, they didn't have a response in place. They didn't have an idea in place. They just shut down the factory. There was a lot of things that could have been done prior to shutting it down to increase the supply so that there wasn't such a massive shortage. And we are still suffering the effects of that massive shortage even today. So in August, the company restarted production at its facilities and a lot of other places. Anyway, it's so the problem was getting production back up to where it was supposed to be. And then as of this month, no, no, no getting fussy. You are not allowed to get fussy. I think a little person might have a dirty diaper that I'm going to need to address sooner rather than later. But anyway, there's still things going on today. They at the FDA, they have made changes to their structure so that these sorts of issues are being um, streamlined into one person so that all the reports are going to one person and so that they can theoretically make better plans in the future. Hopefully that works. Um, but this is still an issue. So it's a cascading effect. Um, when you lose one of, let's say you've got a table and one of the legs of the table is broken and you've got to replace it. Well, then you should prop up that side of the table before you take the leg off, or you should make a plan and not just, remove the leg and hope the table still supports all the weight that it's supporting. And that's really what they did to the formula industry. They took one of the main producers of the majority of formula in the United States out of production with absolutely no plan and no concept of how they were going to help these women and these mothers and fathers feed their babies. And that amount of just absolute blatant irresponsibility and negligence to the most vulnerable population of Americans is absolutely unacceptable. And it just I really there have been times where I have been absolutely flabbergasted about the just ridiculousness of this whole situation. And it's not like there is another alternative food source for babies. If a mother has lost her milk supply or is struggling to produce milk herself, then this is a medical necessity. This is a like live or die thing. And I really, all hats off to mothers and fathers because the amount of compassion and ingenuity and just community that has come out of this, not from the federal government, but from the citizens, from our neighbors, and has been absolutely astounding. Like I said, I have seen multiple places on military spouse pages. Hey, I have this extra formula. What do I like? Who needs it? It's free. We have been blessed I was struggling to find formula for our baby, and that was causing me major anxiety because, like I said, I've always had a supplement. I do my best to breastfeed as much as I possibly can because I know that breastfeeding will help um, build a baby's immune system in a way that formula just can't. And so I have always done my best to give my babies as much breast milk as possible. But supplementing has just always been something we've had to keep in mind and do. And it's not like my babies have been able to eat just any formula. We have tried. Oh my gosh, our first baby was the poor guinea pig and had to try several different formulas before we found one that he child number one could stomach without throwing up, which, oh, is not pleasant. Anyway, so this is a real issue. This is something that hits home. And I was struggling to find the formula that we typically use because, like I said, it filled in a hole that the Similac, like super fancy type for sensitiveness, um, would normally cover. And so people who normally buy that type of Similac were buying what I normally buy because it was the closest thing. And so all of a sudden, demand for what we normally purchase went through the roof. And so they're limiting quantities of how much you can buy at a time. They're not letting you ship it to your home. Yeah, that's a thing. I can't even buy it online and have it shipped to my house. And so I was panicking. And so I put it out on our congregation page, and I felt so blessed with the response. Literally overnight, our congregation was checking every store that they walked into to see if they could find this formula for me. And also, if they couldn't find that one, if they could find the alternate one that we could use, that it's not as effective and it's twice as expensive. Literally, one can of the one we normally get is $22. One can of the alternate version is $50, same amount of formula. And so overnight, we all of a sudden had all this support of people looking and just calling, "Hey, is this the right one? Is this what you needed? Oh, hey, I found one. I bought it." And then bringing it over and we'd pay them back. We had family members looking for it for us. And so we have been blessed. Thanks to community and family, we have been able to find what we needed to feed our baby. And I think that's the good side of what's come out of this experience is the rallying of parents, that parents are supporting each other and like helping and caring and looking out for each other. And I'm sure there has been some people hoarding and reselling formula. I'm not going to put it past people. It's probably happened. But by and large, that's not what I've seen. By and large, what I've seen is people saying, "I have more than I need. What do you need? Let me help you." And that is amazing. What I haven't seen is anyone in our federal government getting their ness together and actually saying, how did we mess this up by the numbers? And how could we prevent this in the future? Or the company saying, maybe we have our eggs in one basket way more than we should. And how could we fix this? I don't feel like that has happened. And now there were some legislation, baby's being taken care of by daddy. So yes, you're going to hear baby in the background, but baby is okay. But anyway, yes, legislation was passed last summer. We still have a problem in January. So obviously the legislation that was passed was not effective. And I don't think that legislation can fix everything. I don't think government regulation can fix everything. I think this is going to be a complex answer, but obviously it's something we need to answer. So that is my little rant and rave for now. I feel like I did more ranting and raving and explaining in this episode than maybe using all the articles I've read, which PS, I've read like 20, 30 articles on all of this, plus lots of reports and that legislation. Maybe someday I'll break down that legislation. If you're interested, I can break down the legislation for you. I read 2 congressional bills on this. Like I said, don't feel like they did much. But anyway, yeah, so that is long story short on what's been going down with baby formula in the United States in regards to the situation. Anecdotally or interestingly, at one point, Catherine, now Princess of Wales, actually authorized for the royal baby formula manufacturer to send formula over here to help out. There were individuals who were stationed here that were deployed to Europe, and they were like, yeah, there's no shortages over there. But ironically, the UK, who has stepped up and helped us the most, is now actually suffering from helping us. There are some shortages starting to happen in the UK, which I think is massively unfortunate. So, is there probably a magic bullet answer to this question? Probably not. Are there things we can learn from what happened? Heck yes. Are there things that could be improved? Quite definitely. Can government fix all of our problems? Obviously not. And yeah, I wish I could. I think the biggest takeaway for me was I wish I could exclusively breastfeed my children. But that said, you have been listening to Life of a Military Wife, and as always, I am your host, Sam Wolf.